My name is Maya. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a senior accountant for a firm in Chicago. My life has always been about numbers, balance sheets, tax codes, and clear-cut results. I like things that make sense. What didn't make sense was my family's dynamic. I grew up in the shadow of my cousin, Brooke. Although we were raised almost like sisters in my grandmother's large estate in Lake Forest, Illinois, we were never equals. Brooke was the darling of the family, charismatic, beautiful, and a professional socialite who spent her days spending her parents' money and her nights documenting it on Instagram. I was the mousy one, the one who stayed home to help my grandmother, Evelyn, with her medication and her taxes, while Brooke was off at Coachella or yachting in the Hamptons. My parents and Brooke's parents always reinforced the hierarchy. Maya, be a dear and help Brooke with her bags. Or Maya, you don't need a new dress for the gala. You're so good at making do with what you have. Brooke didn't just accept the favoritism, she weaponized it. She would borrow my jewelry and lose it, or accidentally forget to invite me to family dinners, knowing I was upstairs working. 2 months ago, Evelyn passed away. She was the matriarch, the one who held the massive family fortune and the historic Lake Forest estate. At the funeral, Brooke was draped in designer black lace, dabbing her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, already talking about how she was going to turn the estate into a content house for her influencer friends. Grandma always said the house was my spirit animal, Brooke chirped during the wake, sipping expensive champagne. Maya, I'll probably let you keep your little office in the basement for a few months while you find an apartment. I'm generous like that. I didn't say anything. I knew Evelyn better than anyone. I was the one who sat with her every night for the last 3 years. I was the one who listened to her stories about how her own sisters had tried to push her out of the family business decades ago. Evelyn hated entitlement. Yesterday was the reading of the will. We gathered in the mahogany-lined library of the estate. My parents, Brooke's parents, and Brooke herself were all there, looking like they were waiting for a lottery payout. Brooke was already wearing a vintage diamond brooch she had liberated from Evelyn's jewelry box that morning. The lawyer, Mr. Sterling, looked over his spectacles. Evelyn was very clear. The liquid assets, the cash and stocks, are to be divided equally among her children. My parents and Brooke's parents exhaled in relief. It was millions. However, Mr. Sterling continued, the Lake Forest estate, the family heirlooms, and the controlling interest in the family's real estate trust are a different matter. Evelyn felt that property should only belong to someone who understands the weight of a home. Brooke leaned forward, a smug smile on her face. Here it comes, she whispered. The estate and the trust, Mr. Sterling read, are bequeathed in their entirety to Maya. The room went ice cold. Brooke's smile didn't just fade, it curdled. What? That's impossible. Maya is the help. She's the accountant. I'm the face of this family. There is more, Mr. Sterling said, silencing the room. There is a character clause attached to the inheritance of the estate. For the next 12 months, Maya is the sole executor. If any family member attempts to contest this will or harass the primary beneficiary, their share of the liquid assets will be immediately forfeited to a local charity. Brooke's father stood up, red-faced. This is elder abuse. Maya, you manipulated her. You were in that house every day, whispering in her ear. I looked at my uncle, the man who had ignored my existence for a decade unless he needed his taxes filed for free. I didn't whisper anything, Uncle, I just listened. Something none of you bothered to do. You're going to give it back, Brooke hissed, her eyes darting around the room. You don't even like this house. You're a minimalist. You live in a cubicle. I'm not giving anything back, Brooke, I said, standing up. In fact, I've already made some decisions. Since the estate is now mine, I'm changing the locks this afternoon. And Brooke, that brooch you're wearing. It's part of the heirloom collection. You have 10 minutes to put it back on the table before I call the police to report a theft. You wouldn't, Brooke gasped. Check the balance sheet, Brooke, I replied. I'm an accountant. I'm very good at tracking what belongs where. And right now, you're in the red. The 10 minutes passed in a blur of screeching and frantic phone calls. Brooke eventually slammed the diamond brooch onto the library table with such force I thought the wood might chip. She marched out, her designer heels clicking furiously against the marble, while my parents and hers followed closely behind, shouting about how they would find a way to break the will. But Evelyn was smarter than they gave her credit for. She knew that the character clause was a legal cage they could unescape without losing their millions in cash. If they sued me, they'd be poor. If they left me alone, they'd stay rich. It was the ultimate test of their greed versus their ego, and I knew greed would win every time. By 5 p.m., The locksmiths had finished. The heavy oak doors of the Lake Forest estate were now secured with a system Brooke could uncharm her way past. I sat in the library, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a warm blanket. For the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's life. A week later, the negotiation phase began. My mother called me, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt like poison. "Maya, darling, we were all just so shocked at the reading. You know how Brooke gets, she's just high-spirited. But surely you aren't going to live in that big house all by yourself. It needs life, it needs parties." Brooke was thinking she could move into the East Wing just to help you manage things. "Mom, stop," I said, leaning back in Evelyn's favorite armchair. "Brooke isn't moving in. In fact, I've already contacted an architectural firm. I'm converting the East Wing into a subsidized housing office for a local nonprofit. The rest of the house is being turned into a private library and archive for the city's historical society." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You're giving it away. The family legacy." "No, Mom, I'm protecting it. A legacy is about what you leave for the world, not how many selfies you take in a gilded mirror." Evelyn didn't want this house to be a playground for Brooke's vanity. She wanted it to mean something. "I'm making sure it does. You're being so selfish, Maya. After everything we gave you. You gave me a front row seat to your favoritism," I replied calmly. "And now, I'm using the seat to watch you all learn how to live without my labor. Don't call me again unless it's to talk about something other than money." The real climax came a month later during the Lake Forest Founders Gala. Brooke had shown up, somehow managing to get a ticket through a friend, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was cornering people in the ballroom, telling them a sob story about how her bitter cousin had stolen her childhood home. I walked up to the group just as she was mid-sentence. "And now she's turning it into a charity office. Can you believe the spite?" I smiled at the group, many of whom were the very donors I had been working with for the Historical Society project. "Actually, Brooke, it's not spite, it's an endowment. And speaking of things that don't belong to you, I noticed you're wearing the family's emerald teardrop earrings, the ones specifically listed in the estate's in-home inventory." The color drained from her face. The socialites around her shuffled uncomfortably. I just borrowed them for the night," she stammered. "I'm family. You're a guest," I corrected her, my voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "And since UVA violated the character clause by publicly disparaging the executor and removing heirlooms from the vault without permission, I've already instructed Mr. Sterling to freeze your next quarterly distribution. The funds will be redirected to the Lake Forest Children's Hospital." Brooke looked like she was going to faint. The darling of the family was suddenly a liability. Her friends, seeing the shift in power, began to drift away toward the bar, leaving her standing alone in the center of the room. "You've ruined me," she whispered, her eyes welling with real tears, this time tears for her bank account. "No, Brooke," I said, taking a sip of my water. "I just balanced the books. You've been living on credit you didn't earn for 30 years. The bill is finally due." I walked away, leaving her in the middle of the ballroom. I didn't feel the need to look back. I went home to my quiet, historic estate, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in the library to read. I had reclaimed my name, my space, and my peace. The mousy cousin was gone. I was Maya, the owner of my own destiny, and for the first time in my life, the numbers finally added up. I chose myself, and the silence was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard.